This episode of the QA is brought to you by Rainier Arms. It is the end of the month, which means it is time for the QA. My name is Dave Tim. Thank you guys very much for joining me and spending a few minutes of your day checking out this video where we answer your questions. As always, if you want to see your question get on the show, the best way is to email us. That email address is shown below, theqa@gunsandtactics.com. You do your part and email us a question. I will do my part and answer it on the show. And then, of course, one lucky question asker wins a prize thanks to our sponsor. So let's just do a quick comment cleanup really quick on our last month's episode, which was the May edition. I did that out in my backyard because the studio was a complete mess. And I have to say, I'm actually enjoying a weekend at a family member's place that we were lucky enough to hang out with. So I'm kind of filming this on location, enjoying in my opinion, a much-deserved weekend off. So that's why you will be seeing the unfamiliar set. And hopefully the quality's okay. I'm recording this with a camera and my earbud just because I was trying to travel a little light. So just a quick comment cleanup, like I said. Somebody was commenting about my backyard chairs because they didn't like the color, and I gotta say, the color kind of works. I know it's a bright yellow, but in the backyard it kind of gives it a summer vibe, and it kind of works. But I realized they wouldn't be my first choice either. And then we got some comments about my chipmunk hunting, which was cool. And I did get a comment from Kevin, and he was replying to we were talking about tracking things. We were talking about like trunk guns and how to keep track of firearms to make sure if they were to get stolen, you have the serial numbers, things like that. And he recommended an app for the Android called GunSafe, and it was great for tracking your firearms, accessories, ammo, range sessions, membership, and allows for data backup. So I thought that was cool of him to comment. So Kevin, thank you for that comment recommending the Android app GunSafe. I have not played with it, but I think that's definitely something to check out. I'm an iOS user, and I use a database program to kind of keep track of all my serial numbers, photos, things like that. I think it's called, what is it called? Tap Forms is what I'm using, but something, very similar to probably a lot of the other stuff. Another one, Don also commented for an iOS app called My Arms Cache. I have not personally played with it, but I am definitely going to check it out. So I do appreciate you guys making comments and helping, the community for the, the better good. So I do appreciate that. Before we get into the questions, I'm super excited for the upcoming 50K giveaway, guys. As of right now, when I'm making this video, I am seeing that we are at 49,956 subscribers. So we are 44 subscribers away from officially beginning our 50K giveaway. Now, we're still organizing with some sponsors. However, we're going to be giving away at least one gun and then some other prizes on top of that. So I'm super excited with all of the amazing people that have shown their support of the channel and want to give for this massive 50K giveaway. And how we're going to be handling this is you will need to head on over to gunsandsandtactics.com and sign up for our email list. That's going to be the easiest and best way for us to manage all of the people that want to enter, so we can get all of that data. And then we also want to make sure we thank our sponsors for donating to this. So we want to make sure you're heading on over there, and we're going to give you all the details, not only in a video, but also in an email. And you can enter, and then we'll go ahead and pick our winners, I should say, and give our prizes out for the 50K giveaway, which will probably be happening in July. So I'm super excited about that. So the first one I got was actually an anonymous question, and he actually is requesting some feedback from me reference getting into law enforcement. And I just have to say, I'm not going to mention your name. I'm not going to mention any part of your message or anything like that. But I do appreciate you reaching out, and I will be replying to you now that I'm going through the end of the month questions and things like that. But I will be reaching out and kind of sharing with you kind of my thoughts on your particular situation as far as getting into the career. So I admire you for wanting to get into it. And I also admire you for being upfront and just asking some really good questions that I think a lot of people would be afraid to ask. So kudos to you. I will be reaching out. Now, this other one is from Quentin, and this is not a question, but this was a data point, and he has what kind of gun is this? SIG 290, and he had to disassemble it and run a rod down the barrel. Next round did the same thing. No bulges in the cases, shot about 10 rounds, and then he test fired with some other hollow point, and it was fine, but it was a bad failure to failure to extract is what it looks like with some steel ammo. And he sent a couple pictures, which I'll show you. That's the thing. I will say, if you are running cheap ammo, no matter what gun, you're only going to get performance as good as that cheap ammo. I had my primary SBR at the time was a Noveski 10.5 inch, and that thing ran awesome. It's just a great shooting rifle. However, I want to say it was like some Tula steel in it, just the bottom of the barrel, cheapest steel ammo I could find, and it did not run very well in that gun. So sometimes you have to be aware, if you put good ammo in, you're going to generally get good performance. You put bad ammo in, you're generally going to get bad performance. Now, I know somebody's going to comment like, my $600 AR that I put together from blah, blah, blah will shoot steel case just fine. And you know what? It certainly might, but it also likely is overgassed and has a very loose cut chamber in some ways to allow for these loose tolerances and stuff. And that's not necessarily a bad thing either, but just keep in mind, sometimes if you put cheap ammo in, you might have to expect cheap or lower performance out. All right, this first question is from Brad. I was wondering if you have any recommendations for adding an extended mag release for the Glock G45. Currently I'm using a Vickers, but it's not quite enough extension. I've seen the kind that extend the plate that have screws, but I don't know about their durability for a primary carry. And then a little bit of context, he also added he has his larger palms but shorter fingers, so he wants it'll be a little bit easier for him to use. So here's the thing with extended mag releases for the Gen 5, which is technically what the Glock 45 is. Now, I have the Vickers as well, and I would argue, in agreement with you that it is not the most extended mag release out there. Some of them extend out further, some of them have extensions that you add on, like you said, with screws. Other ones out there that are machined. So as of right now, I don't have a really awesome recommendation just because the product doesn't exist yet. Now, there are a couple. Hive Technologies makes one, HYVE, and then there is also another brand, I believe it's made by NDZ. I'm not familiar with that because I have not used it personally, but here's the thing with those is that they're aluminum made. And anytime you put an aluminum mag release in a Glock, the potential to tear up your mags is there. The mag catch or mag release is polymer. The magazine is polymer. That's generally a good thing, polymer on polymer. Once you add an aluminum or a metal part, you have the potential to wear that. And I know a couple of other brands out there of the aluminum style mag catches that have really worn those, magazine relief cut, if you will, the catch cut of the magazine. That I've seen that wear down. So unfortunately, I don't have a great recommendation. I'm personally running the Vickers made by Tango Down on all of my Gen 5 Glocks as well. And then what I've done is I've stippled some of them to add a little bit of texture. Otherwise, what I had to do back in the Gen 4 days before they actually made an extended mag release is I actually took two mag releases, cut one, and then I, in essence, super glued and kind of stippled it and plastic welded or melded it together to the other one to kind of make my own extended mag release, and then I had to sand it smooth. So that, if you're crafty, you might want to try something like that. As far as the other ones with like the set screws and stuff, obviously you're going to want to use the proper thread locker and degrease, so that way it's the most durable and it's attached. And I've ran some of those in my competition guns, and I've never had them come loose. However, I also make sure I thoroughly degrease and use thread locker, and I'll put a video up here about thread locker 101. And actually that video has done really well on its own. A lot of people have found it helpful, so maybe you would as well. So yeah, hopefully someone is going to come out, like one of the polymer accessory makers is going to come out with an extended one. Otherwise, the Vickers is all I have. Otherwise, those metal ones, but keep in mind there could be the wear there. So thank you for the question. All right, this next one is from Daniel. Dave, I brought a brand new Christensen Arms MPR and 300 Win Mag, and I went to switch the muzzle brake with my QD muzzle brake for my suppressor. The crush washer that came with the gun is warped and can't be taken off. I tried twisting it through the threads, but it is stuck. Yeah, that sucks. Crush washers are soft, and as the name implies, they're meant to be crushed and kind of, worn into place, if you will, or kind of shaped into place. And sometimes they get stuck and they get bent and, crushed into place. I've had a couple of them on ARs where I've had to basically try some Croil, try some heat, some penetrating oil, and some heat to try to see if you can loosen it to get it to move. You want to try to get it to move away from the shoulder if you can. And then I've either had to use a punch, and a very small, fine punch, and a hammer to try to get it to tap that and to try to get it move away from the shoulder to get it some room. And then in some cases, I've either had to use a file. I know some gunsmiths will use a mill. They'll put the barrel into a milling vise, and then they'll use a milling machine, and they'll actually cut the crush washer. So that's an option as well. And then obviously with the mill, we're able to move, the table by thousandth of an inch, so you can be very precise with your cutting. But it's a little nerve-wracking, especially on an expensive gun like that. So that's what I would suggest, is you're probably going to have to take it to a gunsmith or a very competent machinist, someone who knows how to run a milling machine very well, and then you're going to want them to probably look at it and end up cutting that crush washer in 2 spots, and then it'll fall off, is what I've done. So that's kind of where you're at, unfortunately. This next question is from Rusty. Enjoy the QA, look forward to it. Well, thank you very much, Rusty. I appreciate that. And I'm guessing by your email address where you're at, and I would generally be curious what you think of living there as well. I came across a video about that city in Oregon. I can't remember how many years ago, and I thought, yeah, it looks like a pretty cool place to live. I have a 6.5 Creedmoor in AR-10. It's a LWRC, has an adjustable gas piston, and I shoot it suppressed. I have the adjustment on least gas, but I'm still over-gassed and ejecting slightly forward of my firing position about 2 o'clock. What can I do to eject it more 4 o'clock? Would having a different buffer or spring, and if so, should I go lighter or heavier? So first off, I would not just look at the pattern, but I would also look at the ejection velocity and make sure it's actually, getting a good ejection arc, and it's actually, going a good few feet away. If it's just piddling out at 2 o'clock, that might not mean that it's overgassed. So you also want to look at how it is ejecting, not just where it is ejecting, if that makes sense. So the ejection pattern as far as where is very important, but also the velocity of that brass and where it's going, and is it consistent. Just dribbling out the ejection port at 2 o'clock doesn't necessarily mean that it's overgassed. It could be undergassed. But assuming that it has good arc, good velocity, it's relatively consistent, you can then look at a heavier buffer, or you could look at a silent captured spring system like the JP silent captured spring system. Their large frame silent captured spring system, in my opinion, is the nicest out there for tuning, because you can not only tune spring rates, you can also add different weights, especially if you're shooting suppressed. And those guys have, as far as I'm concerned, JP has like the operating system of the AR pretty much mastered, especially when it comes to suppressed. I have a video coming up with a JP rifle that's kind of a suppressed optimized rifle, and it's just a work of art. But in essence, with the suppressor, you're going to want to try to keep that gun locked up a little bit longer before it begins cycling. So yeah, I would try a heavier buffer. I don't know what you're running in there now, or if you're okay with the investment. I mean, you already spent a lot of money on the rifle. I personally would look at the JP silent captured spring system, the adjustable mass version. If you call up JP, hey, this is what I have, this is the ammo I'm shooting, this is the suppressor, they'll recommend kind of a starting weight and spring rate, and then you can get the spring pack, and you can kind of tune it from there until you get that optimized ejection pattern. So that's what I would recommend. All right, before we answer the next couple of questions, we are going to take a break and thank our sponsor, Rainier Arms. If you like all the cool stuff in the firearms community at a discounted price with free ground shipping plus exclusive early access, then you owe it to yourself to check out the Rainier Arms Apex Club. For the low price of just under $100 a year, you get free ground shipping on all of your orders from their distribution center right smack dab in the heart of the country in the Midwest, so you get fast shipping from either side of the country no matter where you're at, and you get exclusive early access. They're always constantly posting things to Apex Club members first before it's open to the general public, plus you get a discount. It could easily pay for itself. If you guys like AR stuff, handgun stuff, precision rifle stuff, shotgun stuff, they're adding new products every week. Check out the Rainier Arms Apex Club. I love getting orders from them because I make an order and it's at my house within just a couple of days usually. So their new distribution center in Kansas is doing an awesome job. And again, just good people. I love the guys at Rainier Arms. They take good care of me. They'll take good care of you. Check out the Apex Club from Rainier Arms. This next one is from Brad. This is looking for a muzzle device for flash and muzzle rise comp. I don't want to break for recoil or anything else blasty. I switched back to an A2 bird cage because it works. However, since I'm sure you've used more than a handful, I have so far, I'm wondering if you know of any that work better that are worth the extra cost. So that is a great question. In my opinion, with muzzle devices, it's really easy to go from a flash hider, which doesn't do a ton for recoil, doesn't do a ton for muzzle rise, but it's pretty good at, obviously hiding flash. And then you start to get into these comps or muzzle brakes to where it gets very blasty, like you're talking about, and anyone shooting near you, next to you, whatever, is very easily annoyed. Or you have the obnoxious comps, like the obco is what I used to call them. And anybody who would come to my classes with an obco, we would have to know and put them on the very end, because any person that they shot next to just got annoyed. Like, we had one guy bring his 3-gun rifle to a class, and I want to say it was like a Titan muzzle brake, or comp, excuse me, which is just a very effective comp, but it was obnoxious, like rattle the fillings in your mouth, obnoxious. And nobody likes shooting next to him. So, yeah, there's a balance. Now, to answer your question, to date, my favorite all-around, just good, kind of tactical, still hides flash, still does a little bit for recoil, is not obnoxious at all, is the Bravo Company comp. The battle, what do they call it? Let me look it up here. Give me one sec. All right, it is the Bravo Company BCM Gunfighter Compensator. They have a Mod O and a Mod 1, depending on what length you're looking for. But it looks kind of similar to an A2 at a quick glance. But when you look at it, you see it kind of has like a cone-shaped kind of baffle in there, and then the ports are a little different. What I like about the muzzle device, it's externally, it's not huge. It doesn't have all these extra ports. It's not obnoxious, and it was not designed to be the most effective comp. It takes a little bit off recoil, but it still does a good job at hiding the flash. And what's nice is that it doesn't have a ton of pressure. Most people who shoot next to me don't even know I have it on there compared to like an A2. They retail for about $90, but in my opinion, they work, and they work really well for that purpose. So unless I'm mounting a suppressor-specific muzzle device like the dead air stuff that I run, if I want a gun to have something other than an A2, my personal choice is the BCM Gunfighter Compensator. I used to run a Battle Comp. Battle Comp has a little bit more outward pressure, and I did have some issues with a couple of Battle Comps a long time ago that they bulged, and they said it was like a heat treating issue, but it just kind of left a bad taste in my mouth. So right now I'm having good luck with these BCMs, and that's what I'm sticking to. Next question is from Thomas. Thomas is starting to get into precision rifle shooting, and it's kind of a long one here. So he has liked my videos with precision rifle. He also wants to try 22. I think the majority of your question is kind of come down to stock versus chassis and kind of setup. Here's what I like about both. A chassis can be a very rigid, very structurally sound frame, if you will, to the gun. Depending on the chassis, there are some that use AR furniture, and I didn't find them quite as comfortable as, say, like the Magpul Pro 700, which actually I think is an underrated chassis out there. I'll put a link up there to my first look video. That has a lot of adjustability, and the ergonomics are pretty good. It's not just like an AR bolt gun, which some people like. I personally don't. If I want to shoot a bolt gun, I want different ergonomics than an AR. I'm manipulating it different. I'm shooting it different. I just don't want an AR grip and an AR stock. So that is kind of one thing, depending on what price point you're looking at, things like that. The new MPA Matrix chassis, I kind of fell in love with. I got to play with one at a couple of matches ago, got behind it, and immediately the comfort was really, really nice. It felt really, really stock-like for comfort, but it had the rigidity of a chassis. It had the modularity of a chassis for adding things. It had the built-in ARCA rail. I'm probably going to do a video on the MPA Matrix here coming up, but I really like that. Now, where a stock will give me, preference is the comfort. I like that I can get that high thumb. I like that, it's ergonomic, the curves are there. It doesn't have to abide by having a grip in a certain spot like a chassis would, so you can only have limited position. The stock, they can design that in a way to where it's super comfortable. However, with the stock, you generally have to bed the gun, bed the action to the stock, or you can look at something like what Manners has with their mini chassis, which is kind of like an inlet in the stock to get that same rigidity. Foundation makes some really excellent stocks. Manners, Macmillan. I also really, really like the Grayboe stocks. I've been very happy with my Grayboe Ridgeback. I'll post a video to my review of the Ridgeback up there. But that's kind of personal preference. Get behind some different guns, see what you like. Now, what you don't see at a lot of matches is like a traditional hunting wood stock, because they don't have the stability of a synthetic or synthetic materials. And then obviously, they don't necessarily have the right profile. So you're going to want something that has some of that profile. The advantage is the ergonomics. But whatever you pick, I would just say pick a good one. Right now, if I had to pick a stock, I like the Grayboe. I like some of the stuff from Manners. And if I had to pick a chassis, I would either be like the Pro 700 from Magpul, or the MPA matrix. This next question is from Jacob. Jacob, I can't remember if we messaged before or if maybe you read a comment or something before, but he basically asked about beyond zeroing a rifle. I can't remember if I mentioned it in what context, but I did say that there is more to zeroing a rifle than just simply aligning the point of aim and the point of impact. And he was kind of wondering what my process is for zeroing. So short version is obviously getting super steady and zeroing the point of impact to meet the point of aim. So that's going to be, using the knobs to adjust the crosshairs to where you're actually hitting point of aim, point of impact, and then zeroing the knobs. I go beyond that by then making sure I get the chronograph out and I get a good muzzle velocity for that ammo, for that gun, for that specific weather condition, and I add it to my app. Then from there, I can go ahead and if I have the distance, kind of shoot to distance a little bit to see if the data that I'm getting from the app matches the performance I'm seeing. If not, I can adjust. And also, as I zero or check zero in other weather conditions, I want to add that information to the app so I can make better choices and get as much data as I can. So it's not just aligning everything, it's aligning, making sure everything's level, making sure the knobs are then zeroed, getting a good muzzle velocity, and putting all of that information into my ballistic software and then confirming. And I do plan on having a video coming up on that, so don't worry about that. This last question is from Dustin. This was via a message. Dustin wants to know how to properly determine which height scope rings to get for a precision rifle. And the trick that I've used is if you have the gun with the base and you have the scope, I'll basically use either nickels or dimes, and then I will kind of stack them on the base to kind of, set the scope on that stack of nickels to kind of determine what height rings I want to get. And actually, it's something that it was kind of hard for me to explain, so I'm going to make a separate video on that. But the catch is you have to have the scope, you have to have the rifle, and most people when they order, they want to order the rifle, the scope, and the ring, so when they get it, they can put everything together. How scope rings are measured is from the top of the scope base or the top of the rail to the center of the ring. So what you will need to know is where you want the center of the scope to be above the base. That's the height of ring that you need to get. So you'll need to know the diameter of the scope, and then in essence we'll put that in half. So a 1-inch diameter scope, we would be at a 1/2 inch, so we already know we need to be at least a 1/2 inch, and then we need to know how high it is to get the bell or the objective to clear the barrel in the rifle. So again, I'll do another video on that, but if you have the gun and you have the scope, you can basically use shims, nickels, whatever, and then kind of stack that up, and then you'd measure that stack, and let's just say it's a 1/4 inch, and then you need to add half the diameter of the scope, so 1 inch would be half, so then you know you need scope rings at least 3/4 of an inch high in that crude example. So it's something I'll plan on doing a video on as well. All right, that does it for this month's questions. Let's go ahead and pick our winner. Random number generator. Winner is going to be Jacob. So Jacob, I will be in touch with you to get you your prize. Thank you very much, Jacob, for participating in the QA. Guys, that'll do it for this episode. Again, if you want to see your question get on the show, make sure you send us an email to theqa@gunsmithing.com. The email address is shown at the bottom of the screen. It is also in the description below. Send us your questions. Please hit that like, share, and subscribe button. Again, I'm super excited to get to the 50K giveaway, which by the time you're watching this, we might already be in progress of our 50K process. Head on over to gunsandtactics.com. Make sure you sign up there. Please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you very much for watching, and have a great day. We work really hard to make content that we hope you as a shooter would enjoy. Subscribe to our channel, check out our featured videos and playlists, and if you have a question firearms related, go ahead and send an email to the address shown on the screen to be entered into our monthly QA series.